Hello, welcome back to The Limelight. I'm Craig Hewitt from Castos. This episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Mike Konrad from Reliability Matters. It's really great. Mike and I just dove right into this episode, and so we'll be joining our discussion kind of right in the middle of it. Rookie mistake on my end. After 8 years, I wasn't recording the entire time. So tip number one for this episode is just record as soon as you get on with someone, because all the great stuff happens right when you get speaking with a new guest. My mistake, but your benefit, that Mike and I have a lot of really great stuff to talk about kind of authenticity and being your true self. And from a business perspective, if you're podcasting for your brand, a lesson Mike learned kind of the hard way about giving and having like a growth mindset around creating content and being useful, and his approach to growing his business versus kind of promotional and ads and things like that. So really interesting conversation with someone who I think Mike would say used to be kind of a kind of pushy business person and is now just like a really great giver of knowledge and wealth. And so onward with our conversation with Mike Konrad.
So that's why I don't, I'm not like philanthropic. I'm not doing this, for charity. I obviously it's a marketing plan, but I don't need to look for sponsors or sell ads or get paid to say some words, because I think that would take away. The filters would start popping up, and there are several in our space that do that. In fact, there's only a couple that really are ad and sponsor free, and those are the ones I listen to, because I know that they're talking about what they want to talk about. They're talking about things that will help the industry, not things that will help them sell stuff. So,
do you think it affects kind of you and how you create content, or do you think it affects the perception of the listeners?
Both.
Or viewers to you?
Both. I think if I had a sponsor, say I had company A, and I was going to interview company B, which happened to be a competitor to A, that would cause me to be a little too cautious. And the other thing is, I don't let my guests get commercial either, which at first they're very uncomfortable with, because they just want to sell. And I said, no, we're not going to sell. I show their logo. I in the bio, when I do the intro, I honor who they came from and the experience they have. But they have to, I give them strict instructions. They have to talk about best practices, not their products. They can talk about their products in relation to best practices, but I don't want someone coming on the show. I don't want to be a QVC, where the vendor comes on the show and talks about Model X, Model Y, whatever. I want to talk about, the reason their products add, in my case, I talk about reliability. So why do their products add reliability? How do they add reliability? What are the best practices? What are the mistakes people make? What questions should someone ask when they're looking for a product like that? Who's your ideal customer? Those are the things that I think my audience really appreciates.
As we were talking before, you've done 135 episodes. And I think that one question that a lot of folks have when they're just beginning is like, how can I become a good interviewer so that I can keep the conversation on track? It sounds like you've learned a lot of ways to kind of gently nudge the guests back into the lane that you've designed the show around. Like, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that. I was very fortunate, because much to the frustration of my family, I'm the guy that just goes around and talks to people. And my wife just goes, who are you talking to? I go on vacation and I have like 17 new Facebook friends. And then like a week later, I'm like, who are these people? But I just really enjoy conversation. And, if you want a quiet trip on an airplane and you want to snooze off, you don't want to sit next to me, because I just start talking about what do you do? I'm a very curious person, and I've always been that way. I learn by watching and asking and things like that. I'm a college dropout, and so I learn a lot of stuff. And a few people have asked me, how do you ask such good questions? I said, it's easy. I'm ignorant on these subjects and I want to learn. So I ask questions that I am curious about. And most of my audience are PhDs and, engineers and things like that, and scientists. And there's this thing in our industry, probably every industry, where when you go to a conference, the speakers want to go like way down the rabbit hole and get super geeky and super technical, and you lose 90% of the audience. But they're all ashamed to put their hand up and go, I don't understand the thing you're saying, right? Mm-hmm. So I've always, before I started the podcast, when I do my public speaking, I always, what I call skim pebbles over the water. I don't go deep. Other people will do that. And I get so many people that come up to me privately after a talk and go, thank you. Now it's the first time someone's explained this. I've never really understood it. And I don't want to be the one guy that goes, sorry, I don't get it.
Yeah.
So I speak very simply, and I ask questions based on a beginner's mindset. And even if I know a little bit about something, I do a lot of research before I interview anybody, so I know a little bit about it, but I really don't know it. I've read it, and I don't really appreciate it. So I ask questions that fulfill my curiosity, and it turns out my audience has the same curiosity. They're just not bold enough to ask those questions, lest it makes them look, ignorant or something.
Yeah, I've heard it described as like the curse of knowledge, right? Where if you're in the industry, you know things and you kind of assume that everybody knows them. And right. I mean, I find that kind of hard to get around. Like I've been in podcasting as a profession for 8 years, and to talk to a prospective new customer who has no idea what we're talking about to get into, oh, this is an RSS feed and this is how this works and this is how this works, is prohibitive or just daunting to them. And they're maybe not super tech savvy, or they just don't have any experience with media like this. Right. If you say too much, terrible.
If you say too much, they'll get scared and not want to do it, right? Because it's overwhelming. So I think people learn. I learn on my own cadence. Sometimes people say, don't you wish you knew this before? I'm like, no, because I needed to learn it at the exact synchronistic time because I wasn't ready to do it before. I wasn't, whatever the case may be. I think things come to you when you're ready to learn. And if you're not ready, the universe, not to get metaphysical, but the universe will go, okay, not ready, no problem. We'll try again in a couple years. And then all of a sudden it makes sense, right? If the information's presented too soon, you might reject it because you're just not ready to learn it.
How do, kind of going back to the independent nature of your show, you told me before we started recording, and it was really great. So we should have, it's the curse of every podcaster. Like you should have been recording from the very beginning. That you had a history at the very beginning of like selling quite a bit and like how you presented your brand or your company to the industry. And then you realized not too long ago, right, that it all should be just kind of give and education based. Like, what was that transition like? I mean, obviously the decision makes a lot of sense, and we hold the same kind of beliefs. But what was that process like for kind of you or your business or your brand to say like, hey, we're giving up the promotional kind of maybe pushy bit, and we're just going like all in on giving and just kind of hoping that it serendipitously comes back to us?
Yeah, I was always a big believer in I'm a marketing person at heart. I own a manufacturing company, but I'm a sales guy at heart, right?
Yeah.
And we were arrogant, bombastic, bully advertisers. We had a little bit of money, so we just threw everything at advertising. Advertising back in the day were print ads, which then became digital ads. We exhibited in about 12 trade shows a year at an exorbitant budget, and we were selling a particular product that had particular features that nobody really cared about or understood. But we thought, we were very proud of our product. So we would advertise all of our stats and specs, and we'd slam our competitors and hopefully get a sale. And one day I was at a trade show. We had a very large booth with this really gnarly waterfall in the booth that was 30 feet wide and 16 feet tall. And it dropped. It was like the world's largest inkjet printer, basically. Only instead of ink, it was water, and it had thousands of nozzles, and it would drop water droplets in the shape of images and words, and they would just fall from the sky. And then we had our equipment in front of it. It looked really good. And then just before the show opened, an exhibitor came up, right after the show opened, an exhibitor came up and said, "Do you mind if I take a picture? This is the coolest booth I've ever seen." I'm like, "Sure, of course." I felt proud. And then he noticed our equipment was on wheels. He goes, "Any chance you can move your equipment out of the way so I can get a better picture of the waterfall?" And at that moment, it was like I got hit with a sledgehammer in the face. It's like, what are we doing? It's not about waterfalls, and waterfalls have nothing to do with what we make. And that kind of hit me like, okay, we've gone over the edge. Now it's just crazy. And it became very apparent that all we were doing, and everyone else in our space, all they were doing is making noise. and no one really cared about the noise. And we just decided, kind of, the genesis of the decision was at that moment, but we decided to stop the madness and switch our efforts and our energy to an education model, not a sales model, an education model, because it turns out educated people make educated choices. So we sell a product that fixes a problem that much of our industry faces, but they don't understand the nature of the problem. We do, but they don't. So we now educate on that problem and others. And, we happen to have a solution, but we don't talk about us. I found the best way to sell your product is not to talk about your product. And the best way to get eyes on a screen or your voice into their headphones is by providing value. Give them something they didn't have before. Make it valuable. Even if it's not about what you make, it doesn't matter. Because people figure out, I know that guy. Yeah. And I know where he works. I know what he owns. I'll talk to him. And it took a while, but we had to build the trust that we're not going to be commercial. On my podcast, we don't have any sponsors. We don't run any commercials. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's a solid model for many podcasters. And it works. When it works, it works. It frequently doesn't, but when it works, it works. But that's just not our model. Our model is to provide value. And we're not doing this as a charity. We're not philanthropic. We're doing it as what we think is a savvy approach to gaining credibility in our space. And, we haven't run an ad in, 8 or 10 years. And our business is flourishing. And I think one of the reasons our business is flourishing is because we're a safe harbor in an otherwise, gigantic storm of noise coming from everyone else. And if they come to us, they're not going to get sold. They buy. We don't sell. All we do is provide valuable information that solves their problems. And whether they buy from us or someone else, doesn't really matter. I say that half-heartedly. Obviously, I'd prefer we be the solution to everybody, but that's not the goal. The goal is provide value. And the podcast platform and webinars and live workshops and speaking tours, publishing papers, all of that is in our portfolio of tricks. And it has just been incredibly successful, particularly the podcast.
That's awesome. 2 questions related to that. One is, how long did it take to kind of transform your image either internally or like within your industry and your customers' eyes when you went from the kind of pushy advertising model to the giving content model?
I don't know when the traction started exactly. It's one of those things like watching grass grow. My gardener comes every Thursday, and I don't notice how long the grass is until Wednesday afternoon. Just suddenly, it's just like, oh my gosh,
fair enough. Yeah,
it just grows, and the same with what we do, because we're not expecting results, because we don't have a call to action in any of our efforts. It's hard to tell, except when I look back historically. I know that we haven't run an ad in years, and I think we've attended one trade show in 10 years because our customers kind of forced us to. And I do know that our business is significantly larger than it was before. Now, would that trajectory have happened anyway? Maybe. I don't think so, but maybe. It's a long process. It's not instant gratification. And I like
how long? How long? Like you're 120 episodes or something. How long?
About 120 published episodes right now, I remember it took about a year to get 1,000 downloads, and this is a very niche
super right,
matter.
Super
not
niche.
Something
Yeah.
that Joe Rogan is not concerned about me taking over. Spotify is not offering me an exclusive show. So it's a very niche market. And it took about a year to get 1,000 episodes. And my wife and I just celebrated. We're like, let's toast 1,000 episodes, 1,000 downloads. This is awesome. And right now we're around 36,000 downloads. And it's been about 3 years. So it's growing. I don't think it's quite exponential, but it's definitely, the trajectory is growing faster and faster. And something happened, well, probably about 6 months ago for the first time. I went to a conference. I was speaking at a conference, as I do regularly. And 4 or 5 people approached me and said, "You're the guy with the podcast." I'm like, yeah. And I mean, it made me feel like a little bit of a celebrity in a very macro sense. But it was just so nice to get that kind of full circle, instead of looking at stats, now I'm talking to people and they tell me how much they appreciate the show, and they don't miss it, and they listen to it in the car, or they watch it on YouTube or whatever. We do what you do. We do a video version, which almost nobody watches. I mean, very, very people watch, but we do it because I enjoy seeing someone when I talk to them. It's a much better interview. And some of my viewers would prefer to watch, but because we're a long format show, we're an hour. The optics of sitting in your cubicle watching a YouTube video for an hour are kind of dicey, when your boss comes by. Even though it's educational, it's like, YouTube. So, the majority of my subscribers are on the audio side, right? They subscribe on their favorite podcast app. And that's where the majority of the people hear my show. And then sometimes I bring a guest on that has some, visual assets. And I just tell people that are listening, hey, this particular episode you might be better watching because there's some visual assets. And I had to get used to describing what was on the screen, knowing that 90% of my audience is not watching it at that moment. So, so I've kind of learned to bridge that, but that's how we do it.
Yeah. Yeah. You answered my other question, which was like, how do you think about like the success of the business, or maybe even the cost of like marketing and promotion versus ads and things like that? Sounds like the overall impact of the business has been really solid. And I would suppose that this route is cheaper than all the money you spend on conferences and in ads and things like that to get to the same place.
Yeah, the barrier to entry for a podcast is practically zero. If you own a laptop, then you could be a podcaster tomorrow.
Yep.
Not necessarily a great one, but you can start, right? And the thing about podcasting, it's a little bit like quicksand. The barrier to entry is pretty much zero. And you could do a fair quality with what you already own. But when I say quicksand, me and Amazon are like, we're like this, we're best friends, because all of a sudden I see, oh, Joe Rogan uses the Shure SM7B mic. I think I'll get that, right? And then, I'll get a Rodecaster 2, mixer. Oh, I'll get a subscription to Ecamm. Oh, I'll get, and I'll get studio lights. I'll get a transponder. And you can go deep. You can spend thousands, or you can spend almost nothing. But I'm a big believer in production value. So a really good content with very poor audio and poor video is not going to be a great podcast. Not going to be successful. It's too hard to listen to or watch. Great production value with poor content is also not a good idea. But I think the nirvana, what will guarantee success over time, is a decent production quality, which is so easy to do right these days. It's not that expensive, and obviously good content. So good guests, good questions, good topics, and anywhere minimum decent to good production value. And it's so easy to do. It's so easy.
Yeah, we have a video on our YouTube channel talking about like this exact thing, which is like my setup is about $200 total, $250 total, and like it's good enough, right? It's like we have a nice looking place behind me. I have a couple of lights. I have a good webcam. I have a pretty good microphone. And I think that like for me, that this is easier to solve than really great quality, like really great content. Really great content takes a ton of time to learn how to be a good interviewer and research the guest and format the show. And that's a lifelong kind of journey. I think like buying this from Amazon or the lights or whatever just takes a little bit of money.
Yeah. Not much. It's surprisingly not much.
Yeah. It's amazing.
I agree. And in terms of, you can get the tech pretty cheap, and then you can get the experience over time. And my advice, what I did was I started watching a lot of podcasts, and I watched good ones for inspiration, and I watched bad ones for like negative inspiration, and that helped me. And then I went on YouTube the greatest university in the world, I think, is YouTube. And, some of the times I'm taught by like 12-year-old Russian kids or something, how to do something. I'm like, oh, there goes my ego, right? Here's a 62-year-old like being taught how to do something technical by a kid, but they know. And then I joined some communities, of fellow podcasters. The recording platform I use has their community, and I found that very helpful with, technical challenges and workarounds and hacks and things like that. And then most of the time I spend now is researching. I put a lot of research into a guest. I usually go online. I look at anything on YouTube that they've published, or I read all their technical papers, and I share the proposed questions. I ask them for their input on the questions because I don't know what I don't know. And if there's something they really want to talk about, they can kind of cue me up with a question. And so it's somewhat collaborative, and nothing comes as a surprise. And then we go off the rails all the time. We all of a sudden an answer spawns a question I didn't anticipate. But I do try and, steer it back. I don't want to ambush my guests. But the good thing is I pre-record everything. Nothing's live. I don't find as much value in live as I do pre-recorded. Live things go south, and now everyone sees it. Pre-recorded, if things go south, if a cat walks between the camera and my guest, or a gardener shows up at the window with a leaf blower, that never happened, right? I can fix it in post. So it's incredibly easy and getting easier to produce a podcast that is watchable or listenable.
I won't rehash it, but that was fantastic advice on how to prep yourself and the guest for the interview. So I like folks just rewind 2 minutes and listen to that again, because like Mike has it nailed with how to prepare for a guest. And I think it's a sign of being a real pro is knowing who you're talking to, prepare yourself and them. And so fantastic parting advice for us here, Mike. Thanks so much. For folks who want to kind of learn more about you, check out the show. Where's the best place to go?
MikeKonrad.com is kind of just a general, that's not my company. That's just, that's a portal to the content that I create, to the podcasts and speaking gigs and things like that. If you just want to see what we do, the show is called Reliability Matters, and it's a show about the reliability of circuit assembly. So anything that you own, all the gear in front of you, that comes from companies like us, right? And we make all that stuff. We want it to be reliable. And so I talk about the reliability of electronics, and the products that we make help add reliability to our customers' products. Our products don't make anything. We build giant machines that don't make a thing. It just makes our customers' products more reliable. So it's an extra value-added process. So I'm into reliability. So the show is called Reliability Matters.
Awesome. This is really great, Mike. I learned a ton, and super inspiring to hear like your story and like the journey that you've been on from like a business and a content perspective. So thanks so much.
Well, thanks for having me on, Craig. I really appreciate it, and good luck with your business.
Thanks.